For the past decade, I have continuously asked myself the following question. Why is there such a resistance in the modern martial arts world to use the practice as a vehicle that inspires practitioners to show up in opposition to the status quo of modern society? In other words, a practice centered on realigning with spirit, respect, harmony, giving back, responsibility, and wisdom, or what I refer to as a regenerative way of being. I will come back to that question in a moment. But the truth is that modern martial arts practices are not immune to the modern cultural zeitgeist. Increasingly over the past few decades, especially in what is referred to as the civilized Western world, there has been an overwhelming narrative of materialism, consumption, and competitive advantage. All of these are placed under the rubric of what is required to flourish as a modern human being. Underlying all of this further is a discourse of a modern world that inherently operates based on scarcity, individuality, competition, greed, resistance, and fear. Individuals need to do then what is needed to acquire our rightful share of this scarcity, neatly accepted under the reasoning of a free market economy. There is nothing wrong, we are told, by acquiring far more than we need, or that is reasonable, or even needed for personal survival, because ultimately it's a dog-eat-dog world and it's every human for himself. AKA Darwin's misinterpreted yet widely cited reason for the need to compete: survival of the fittest. We are then lauded with admiration and exalted by our fellow modern human beings should we crack the code of materialistic competitive success. This brings me back to martial arts. Martial arts in of themselves are really just a name for a collective sphere of practices that have, in the modern world, become a livelihood for many. In other words, people who have decided to make this their method of living in our modern world, myself included, have to charge for lessons in order to make a living and, ironically, to survive in the modern system I just outlined. While of course there are going to be many who instruct martial arts who simply see the economic value of doing so. But there are equally many who begin teaching from a position of wanting to make a positive difference in their students' lives. The latter, and sadly, even if they don't want to, invariably end up offering their chosen martial arts discipline in line with the modern cultural zeitgeist of what is valued in our modern society, which, as I noted previously, is largely situated on the practice of individual needs, spirited by consumerism and driven by materialistic wealth. To try to do something different, in other words, in opposition to the modern cultural zeitgeist, and you quickly find out that by not fitting into the status quo, the norm of how we have been indoctrinated to believe in the sanctity of modern individual competitive success, it quickly becomes increasingly harder to quote-unquote make a living. This shouldn't come as a surprise. Consumers of martial arts instruction themselves have been indoctrinated into the modern system of belief that whatever you spend your time on should be about individual gain leading to success. Here again, success is defined as what is widely accepted as successful in the modern world, which suggests one is only successful should one achieve dominance or win over other fellow human beings, be that physically, mentally, or economically. This is then touted as being disciplined, resilient, and courageous, and so forth. Added to this, if you're coming from a position where you have been taught to see the world as based on scarcity, individuality, competition, greed, resistance, and fear, then you naturally will seek out martial art expressions that claim to ensure that you won't become a victim of the modern world paradigm. Hence, the continued rise and proliferation of reality-based self-defense instructors over the past decade. And ironically, it speaks to my point that these academies of martial arts approaches are mainly found in the most affluent parts of the world. In other words, those parts of the world that have become exemplars of the modern consumeristic, materialistic paradigm. Personally, I've had a constant battle with trying to teach martial arts from what I believe it should be that is inherently in opposition to modern society's claims of success, and balancing that with having to concede to modernity's proclivity for individual gain at any cost. It's been a battle, to say the least, simply because students seeking out martial arts practices today are not typically taught to see the practice of martial arts other than another thing they do in their life that will enhance their ability to succeed in the modern world. Modern martial arts instructors are to blame here too, as they have perpetuated the modern world's narrative of scarcity, individuality, competition, greed, resistance, and fear. I get it. It's easier to follow the status quo than being part of a minority of martial arts coaches who choose to teach in defiance of the modern narrative of success. At the end of the day, you probably will have a healthier bank balance too. In the parts to follow this video, I'll explore how I haven't always gotten a regenerative approach to martial arts right, and that while as a teacher of modern martial arts, as much as I want to offer a practice aligned with spirit, respect, harmony, giving back, responsibility, and wisdom, right now, in the modern world, I may have no choice at this moment in time to use the modern world's paradigm to achieve this. I will also be exploring why I believe that historically, if we understand the archetypal nature of martial arts, and those who taught and trained it in a way that made them outliers to the status quo was in of itself the very thing that made what they taught so life-transforming. And finally, while I believe I am way ahead of my time on this, in the future, more and more people will begin to seek versions of martial arts practice, and those who teach it who are actually brave in the truest sense of the word to seek out ways to explore the practice of martial arts as a tool for personal transformation, centered on a more regenerative way of thinking and being. This in of itself will naturally tie into a new emerging paradigm of a regenerative way of knowing and being already underway in the modern world.